So in a previous video, I spoke about that there are three main opportunities for hospitals to focus on for cost savings. And so in this video, we're going to dive a little deeper and talk about the cost savings opportunities. And the first one I mentioned, which is physician preference items. So I'm going to speak to three areas in physician preference items. Number one is that these areas where they can be should be capitated. So these costs should be have a capitated pricing. So regardless if a hospital has 3 vendors, 4 vendors, 5 vendors, those costs for a screw or any kind of component or any sort of implant, whether it's in spine or orthopedics, all the price points need to be established at the same pricing, right? So you don't want to have fluctuation with the same component. It has to be maintained and capitated. But within that model, there are some specific specialized items. And so that area beyond the capitated pricing, you've got to look at those specialized components, because sometimes those don't get benchmarked appropriately and they end up being the area that throws out the cost per case. So it's those exclusions that need to be looked at carefully. The second area is it's the secondary vendors. So those secondary vendors could be smaller areas of spend within that category that sometimes get overlooked, but the hospital could be paying list price or close to list price. Or an area where they don't have a big service line. It could be craniomaxillofacial, where again, going in deeper into those areas that maybe aren't hugely on the radar, right? They're not the big spend, but there's physician preference items with smaller spend, but those price points could be so much out of competitive benchmarking. By looking at them, they could have a 50% reduction. And yes, that's possible. We see that often. And the third area is mapping your cost, your implant cost, to your real reimbursement. And this is like advanced cost savings, and it's so key because you can benchmark, you can capitate, you can look at the exclusions, you can look at the secondary vendors, but sometimes the reimbursement tells a completely different story, and you may need to go deeper or beyond benchmarking or what you've done, because your reimbursement now is only providing a 5% margin or less, and you really need to go back and say, wait, we got to take a second look at those implant costs, because our margins are so thin because our reimbursements have changed, the landscape has changed. If you have any questions about these three areas, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or reach out to me via my email. But I would love to answer your questions or support any of your initiatives, so please reach out to me.